name's Rico. I was here yesterday playing Crash Bandicoot 3, and now I'm back again with another bit more obscure PlayStation 1 game. This is Jet Moto 2 Championship Edition. It's a racing game that was released in 1998, and it's a very unique one. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Alright, so there's 10 characters available from the start. I'm going to play Vampira. I'm going to explain that a bit in the run later. So this is full season, which is all 10 tracks that originated in Jet Moto 2 in a row. So normally I would do full season here. I'm actually going to do custom circuit because it has a mode called Rally, which is the exact same thing, except for it's going to show me the sum of my in-game time at the end. And the timing for this game on Speedrun.com is with in-game time. So this is just like, this will let me know what the run was like at the end, as opposed to just like going off of the real time. But otherwise, this is completely identical to full season. And with that, I think we are ready to go in 3, 2, 1, go. Yep, game audio sounds great. Alright, so the first track here is Slick Rock Gorge, and this is a good way to just explain all the mechanics. So first off, this is a very futuristic-esque racing game. We are on these weird hover bikes that are like the titular Jet Motos. And the first big mechanic is that if you press the triangle button, you see this yellow gauge in the speedometer. That's my turbo gauge. So for as long as I hold down the triangle button, I get this huge speed boost. But I'm playing the Championship Edition of the game, which I'll explain what that is in a moment. But in the Championship Edition, the speed of each racer was just ridiculously boosted. So you go to your top speed very easily. So I'm just going to use the turbo in short bursts to just reach that top speed faster. So the Championship Edition is a version of the game that was actually released by mistake. So the original Jet Moto 2 release had 10 racers on the track at one time. The frame rate was not consistent at all. I think it was like usually 15 to 20. And just the overall speed was a lot slower. And after they released the game, the developer wanted to have his own version of it, which they did in-game as the Championship Edition, that had fewer racers on track, the top speed was increased, and the frame rate was a consistent 30. He liked it so much that he asked Sony to release it as the Greatest Hits release, and they said no. But then when they made the Greatest Hits release, they accidentally burned the Championship Edition, so every Greatest Hits copy of this game is the Championship Edition. And I actually am really glad they did that because I think the Championship Edition is a massive improvement over the original. So another thing with this game in terms of movement is that it really uses like every button on the DualShock controller, or just like any PlayStation controller, really. Like all of the like directional inputs are used. The shoulder buttons are used to like make sharp turns. L2 and R2 are for rotating. So really, like I'm just using the entire controller for this game. Another big thing to note is that I want to stay grounded as much as possible because when you're in the air, your speed kind of just caps at like 60, and you can see on the speedometer that I'm like constantly going over 100 on the ground. So yeah, that was the first track, Slick Rock Gorge. 2:11 is a pretty average time. I think my best here is a 2:05, but the terrain on that track makes it pretty easy to lose a lot of time. So this track is Meltdown. This is overall the shortest track in the run. It is the first of a type of track that the game calls a suicide course. It is a term that I do not think has aged well at all, so it is the only time you're going to hear me say it. But basically the way these tracks work is that instead of being a circular loop like most race courses are, you start in the center of a linear track, and when you reach the end of the track, you just pivot around. And then you go backwards, and by going backwards, you're facing oncoming traffic, and then you go to the other end and do the same thing, and then when you reach the center again, that is a full lap. So you can see here that I'm just wrapping around the edge of the track when I reach it. This is also the track that introduces the grapples. They're the large pink poles that you can hear. They're like emanating a sound. And there is a pink bar in my speedometer, which is the grapple meter. So when I'm near one of these grapples, if I hold circle, it will pull me towards it for as long as I have that pink meter. And that is very useful for just, launching myself around these like sharp turns and such. And it will be a huge part of almost every track for the remainder of the run. I think the only track from this point on that doesn't have a grapple is the very last one. But otherwise, this is like a good snapshot of how varied all the tracks are in theming. You know, Slick Rock Gorge was this, you know, a basic desert-like track, but this is a track based around an active volcano, and I think that's one of the really cool aesthetics of this game, is that every track is really unique in setting and atmosphere. And on top of just the soundtrack and the graphics, it's got a very 90s feel to it, but I just love this game because of it. Thankfully, something that hasn't happened on this course yet, which happens a lot just because of how weird the terrain is that it's very easy to wipe out with, like if you're just going too hard and you just like crash into something. We will almost certainly see me do that because this game is very hard. All right, but yeah, that was Meltdown. All right, so coming up next is Aftershock. This is the last of the easy tracks. The game groups the courses into easy, hard, or easy, medium, hard, and very hard. And there's 3 of each, except for very hard, where there's only 1. But this is Aftershock. The premise of this track is that it's, you know, a post-earthquake Los Angeles, I believe. So there's a lot of very jagged terrain that was not supposed to go on. And I think, okay, so there's a wipeout. If you hit anything too hard like that, yeah, that's how this game can be sometimes. So I guess right now I'll explain the character choice. So every character has 3 stats on the character select screen. There's top speed, acceleration, and weight. Top speed obviously is very nice, but because of how ludicrously you move in the Championship Edition anyway, it's not like the most important, and then acceleration is also nice. Weight is a weird one where the heavier your character is, obviously the less they go flying, which is very nice because, again, you don't really want to be airborne if you can help it in this game. But at the same time, the heavier the character is, the harder it is for them to turn, and when you get into the harder tracks, that ability to turn is so important. So Vampira is one of the balanced racers, and she kind of just has like the best spread amongst the balanced ones. Her acceleration is very good, and her top speed is also pretty solid. Basically, she's just like good, well-rounded across the board. So generally, she's considered the best choice. Other choices that are decent are Gadget is the second most popular. He's Racer 7. I think he's a little faster, but a little like less on acceleration compared to Vampira, if I remember correctly. And then another balanced character is the Max, who's like the most well-rounded. The jagged tracks like these are where like the turbo really comes in, because like every time you go into the air again, you lose speed. So constantly just tapping turbo here is good. And this is also like these, you know, upper parts of the highway are very easy to crash into. This is where like rotating the bike becomes useful. And yeah, that was Aftershock. That was a pretty solid one overall, I would say. So the next track is Arctic Blast. This is the first of the medium difficulty tracks, and it is the first one where you can actually fall off. So when you fall off a track, I mean, it's kind of just like any other racing game. You just get put back on the track, and where you get put is kind of just like there's these big checkpoint signs that you're seeing that the game uses to keep track of your location. There's also like some invisible checkpoints that the game doesn't really tell you about. So if you fall back off the track, sometimes it will take you there. When you wipe out, if your bike stays on the track, you will just respawn wherever the bike landed. If it goes off the track, it just treats you as if you fell off, and then you just go back to one of those checkpoints. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so falling off can lose a lot of time. So this is where the track design becomes a bit treacherous. The way the tracks are designed in this game are very... It's a racing game, but it also has vibes of like platforming, especially in some of the later tracks, which you'll see very soon. And again, I think that's one of the really nice charms of this game. So it's a very unique game, I feel. here in Arctic Blast, I'm like hugging the track boundary just because everything in the center of the track is a lot of, you know, hills and slopes, and again, I don't really want to use those because they throw me into the air. Oh. So I think my best time on this track is like a 2:11, and I don't remember how I got it because I've never gotten anywhere close to it since then. So this is a track that is very easy to lose time in just from like the amount of times you become airborne, along with how easy it is to just fly off the track. I'm starting to lap some of the racers here. The AI in this game is actually pretty notoriously difficult for a first-time player. But I don't know if it's because of the Championship Edition just buffing the speed, but it's just very easy to lap all of them in this version. So this track is Hot Shot. This one has a lot of just like twists and turns in it, which was visible on the map while the track was loading. This one also just has like a really cool song to it, and it's like the biggest standout for it. Here's a place where the grapples are really nice. Like just like you just slingshot through those two tight turns. The Championship Edition also changes the layout of some of the tracks slightly. So there's actually multiple versions of Jet Moto 2. There's the original release, and then there's the Japanese release, which is called Jet Moto 98. And then there's the Championship Edition, which was only released in North America, I believe. And the Championship Edition uses the updated tracks from Jet Moto 98. So for example, in Hot Shot, in the original release, there's like these little like clumps of, you know, hill, I guess, on parts of the track, and it's easier to just like run over them and lose speed as a result. And the Championship Edition just gets rid of them, which is just like a convenient way to not lose time in this track. Also have noticed like there's a huge amount of product placement on the side with these signs. You know, there's like I just passed a Chef Boyardee sign. There's been a bunch of like Mountain Dew signs like right there. They went really hard in making this feel like an actual sporting event, and I really appreciate it because it just adds to the charm of the game. I'm actually a little surprised that hitting that tree didn't cause a wipeout. Sometimes what causes a wipeout is weird. Sometimes I'll just hit a tree with full force and nothing happens, and then sometimes I'll just lightly graze a rock and I'll just go flying. It's very odd. Yeah, one of the downsides, I guess, of the Championship Edition is because it goes so fast, some of these tracks were not designed for it, so it's very easy to just like click into things by mistake. Yeah, that was Hot Shot. That was actually a very solid one. The sub 240 is very good. All right, so the next track is the Shaft. This is the last of the medium difficulty tracks, but honestly, I think it has more in common with hard difficulty tracks. As a kid, this was by far my least favorite track in the game. After learning the run for it, I've actually grown to really like this track. It's actually one of my favorites. So right here is a very small shortcut. Shortcuts are not really a thing in this run just because of the way the checkpoints work. You can't skip a checkpoint. so I have to hit all of them, so any type of like huge shortcut just gets negated by that. But right there I was able to do like a small corner cut to not have to worry about those switchbacks. I just got pushed by someone there. I don't know what happened there. Yeah, so this is another one of those tracks that's like Meltdown, where you start in the center and you go to the end, and then you just like pivot around. This is also the first track that has like the broken bridge that you just saw me go over. This is where the racing and platforming elements really start to blend. There will be several tracks after this that have a broken bridge style like this. This is also the first track where I feel like the AI can really start to mess with you. In combination with like you're just facing them oncoming, and then there's like a bunch of these narrow bridges that you have to like traverse over. It's very easy to just like have a head-on collision with them. Right here, I'm trying to like brake when I go off that hill just to like reduce my airtime. That's something I actually only started doing recently. I'm actually fairly new to running this game. This is a game from my childhood that this is one of the earliest games I played, but I only recently picked up the run of it. So there's still a lot of stuff that I'm personally learning with running full season. So right there, two of the racers were very close to colliding with me. That's just an example. Where's the third one? So like I said, in the original release of this game, the Black Label version, you actually race all of the other 9 racers at the same time. So imagine doing a track like this where you have to deal with 9 oncoming racers instead of 3. That's just how crazy this game can be sometimes. It's actually been very good. Usually at some point in the shaft I get thrown off by something with the AI. Okay, that one was my fault, so I don't think I can count that. But usually like I'll be on the bridge and then like an oncoming racer will just ram right into me and throw me off. I'm surprised that hasn't happened yet. I did that on purpose just because I think it's cool to end the race while you're wiped out. But yeah, that was a very solid shaft. My goal there is a 3 flat, and I've been desperately trying to get a sub 3, but something always goes wrong there. So yeah, this track is personally my favorite in the full season, and it's my second favorite overall. There is also 10 other tracks from the original Jet Moto that you can unlock, but they're not in this race. So yeah, this is Roller Side, and the theme is that it's just like a carnival roller coaster. This is a super difficult track to do fast, just because with all of like the huge hills, there are actually grapple beams underneath the track that are keeping me grounded, and just like being able to hit those while also not hitting these checkpoints or not flying off the track is very, very difficult. And this is like the one track where I'm actually in extreme risk of running out of grapple meter. Also, there's this corkscrew right here. So I found out recently that there's a small shortcut you can do at that corkscrew. I don't think it's particularly worth going for because it probably only saves like a second or two, and it's like very difficult to just like fly through this corkscrew without actually using it. But I found out that it is called the Crazy Ass Bastard Jump, or the Cabbage Jump, which I thought was hilarious. So I just thought I'd share that. Yeah, so it is very easy to just go too fast on this track and just go flying, and it takes a really long time to get back on the map if you fall off on this track. It's just, you just fall forever. And this hill in particular is also annoying because there's the grapple underneath the hill, but there's also a grapple right next to it. Oh, yep, there's the AI running into me. And it's, so in that one hill, if you grapple too early, then you end up getting pulled back and probably will fall off the track and you'll lose a huge amount of time. But if you grapple too late, then you end up just hitting the checkpoint sign. So I haven't really quite figured out how to deal with that yet. I guess another interesting tidbit with this track is I actually had to replace my copy of this game a few months ago actually, because my copy from childhood, there was an example of just hitting the grapple too late. But the song just like skipped on this track on my original copy, and it would just like freeze in place. Which, as hilarious as it was, I think this is one of the best songs in the game also, so I'm glad that like I just get to actually show what it sounds like. Okay, yeah, so there was an example of I just went too fast and I tried to brake, but it was too late. I think the IL record for this track is like sub 3, and I want to know how they did that, because my best here is a 3:12, and I just really wanted something better, but it just never happened for this track. Yeah, overall that was a pretty okay roller side. That's definitely lives up to being the first hard difficulty track. So this next track is Kamate. This is probably my least favorite track in the entire run. It is just very, very treacherously designed. Had to brake there to not fall off. There's a very gratuitous lack of hangrails in much of this track, or guardrails rather, and then there's this very narrow bridge, and then here's another broken bridge similar to the one we saw in the shaft. And then this section is just very rude. It's just very chaotic. There's all of this stuff you have to dodge. There's a huge amount of sharp turns. It's so easy to wipe out here, like I almost did there. And then just another set of sharp turns, and the camera doesn't really help here either. This is, even as a kid, this was also not one of my favorite tracks, and I think it's definitely replaced the shaft as my least favorite. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad track. It's just a very difficult one, so it's very easy to mess up. But I can do a little bit of corner cutting there on the last piece of the broken bridge to just use a turbo to just land further down the track. So that part right there, if I had been even just slightly to the left, it would have counted as me falling off the track, and I would have gone back a bit. So yeah, the death planes are not particularly kind in this track either. Actually really surprised I haven't wiped out in this part at all. It usually happens. That was actually really solid. That might be a gold Kamate. And we end it by just falling off at the end. All right, so we got 2 tracks left. This next one is Chanel. I don't think this track is really difficult in the same way as Kamate is. It kind of just hits you with a lot of aha gotchas that if you're not expecting, you're just gonna like veer off the track, but they're kind of like, they fool you once, and then after that, you just always know it's there. Also, sometimes the audience in this game gets really excited, so that guy was just very excited by that very mild landing I did. So here's like one of the gotchas. They give you like a very brief moment where the sign says caution pit, but you can't actually see it until you go over it. So if you don't have enough speed, you just fall into it. And then that grapple I passed, if you hold on for it for too long, you can actually just fall off the track. So this is what the game calls the staircase in the sky. There's some like turboing you can do there to ease this up a bit, but it kind of just depends on where I land, because the terrain here is just really rough. But like I can do a little corner cut here. And there's just a huge dip here. I brake at the top of that hill, because when you brake, it will let you descend to the ground a little quicker, and that's useful for just landing again. And then there's just like a really short like ceiling there, and it's very easy to run into. Yeah, but otherwise, like this track's definitely much more tame than commentate what you know you're doing. That wipeout was actually completely my fault. I meant to do a sharp turn and I accidentally rotated. One of the downsides of the fact that this game uses every button on the PlayStation controller is that sometimes you just get confused. One more lap of this. I'm actually surprised that didn't count as a wipeout. Usually if like the racer themselves gets hit by anything, that's just an automatic wipeout. And I definitely clipped through that ceiling, so I'm surprised that didn't count. This tunnel can be weird because the game doesn't really like when you try to do like a corkscrew of sorts, and usually it just like sends you flying in the other direction if you try. So that one can be very dangerous to, you know, coast along the sides in. I guess very briefly, I want to touch on, again, on the characters. I forgot to mention this. There are 10 characters from the start. There is an 11th unlockable one named Enigma, and they are far and away the best character in the game. They have maxed out top speed and acceleration and average weight. They're so ridiculously faster than every other character that we actually separate between them on the SRCom leaderboards. Which is why I'm not playing as them. I think the run is more interesting when you play as not Enigma. All right, so this is the last track. This is Nebulous. This is the only track with the classification of very hard, and it absolutely lives up to it. This is by far the hardest track in the run. So a bit of a flashing light warning here. Yeah, so this track also has maybe the coolest premise for a track in any racing game ever. You're literally racing between heaven and hell. And ironically, I find the heaven sections to be much more difficult. This is also definitely the longest track in the run. Actually, up until a few hours ago, my best time here was a 4:12, and then in a practice run right before this, I actually managed to get a 4:03, and I don't know if I'm ever going to replicate that. Yeah, this track kind of just has everything. It has this broken bridge. It has little bits where you do run into the oncoming racers, because that broken bridge is the same one on both passes of it, so you can run into them in that section. You've got this really crazy spiral here, and again, there's just a total lack of grapples, so I can't save myself if I go flying. And especially on the Championship Edition, it is very easy to just go too fast on this track. You'll see me use very, very little of the turbo as a result. I also just love the incredible dissonance between the Heaven soundtrack and the Hell soundtrack. Just go from nice classical harp music to just hard rock. Oh, I was a little too far to the left, okay. Falling off on this track can be very bad because the checkpoints are not generous at all. Usually if you wipe out at all on this track, you are falling off of the track, and then the checkpoints that exist are the literal checkpoints that you're seeing, which are either these pink clouds or the, you know, the walls of fire. There's no invisible checkpoints like there are on other tracks. I didn't even see that person. They just like came up on me and just rammed in immediately. And this is how the AI is with this game sometimes. Sometimes you just get hit by them and there's not a lot you can do about it. All right, we got one more lap. And timing will end when I cross the finish line of this track. A key thing with these transitions that I'm doing is that I actually slow down tremendously in the transitions back to heaven, just because that keeps me from just flying into the air at the start of them, and that saves a huge amount of time to not go flying like that. In the descent into hell, it doesn't really matter so much because you're going downhill anyway, but it's definitely huge for the two heaven sections. All right, so we're coming up to the end here. This is actually pretty solid. Nebulous is looking like it will probably be a sub 420, which is pretty decent. Or it'll be like right at 420, and time. Exactly sub 420. All right, I'm curious to see what the in-game time was, but a 31:07 is definitely very solid real time. 27:47, that is 15 seconds off of the record that I actually set on Tuesday of this week before I came to pace. So that was a very good run for a marathon. But yeah, that was Jet Moto 2 Championship Edition. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Shout outs to anybody who stayed awake to watch this run. I realize it is 6:30 in the morning, and this was definitely the graveyard shift. And I also realize it's no Garfield kart, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, thank you so much to Pace for letting me run this game. I think this is a very underrated PS1 game. The Jet Moto series as a whole is one that I think did not get the love it deserved back in the 90s. If you are interested in running this or just trying this game out for yourself, there is a Jet Moto Discord server that I believe I've linked recently on the Jet Moto 2 Championship Edition SRCom page. Also, huge shout outs to that Jet Moto Discord. I am actually very new to just interacting with the Jet Moto community, and they have been nothing but friendly to me. They're a bunch of very wonderful, passionate people for this series. So, huge shout outs to them. But yeah, otherwise, be sure to stick around for the rest of the marathon.